For example, hitting on the neck like that, you might have seen it shank off to the right, then usually what is blamed is body parts. So as I kind of gave the example in the video of hitting the top of the ball, this time I'm going to catch it in the equator. I was just above the equator on that one. Let me try that again. If you catch it right in the equator, a little high again. I'll get it this time. I've got to get more focused on where my club head is relative to that ball. Notice I'm not setting up to the equator. I set up to the ground, just like I always do. That was closer. But you'll notice that the ball is kind of going straight along the ground like a fast rolling putt. If I can get this one just right this time. There we go. That's perfect. So when you catch it in the equator, that's essentially 3/4 of an inch, because a golf ball is 1.5 inches top to bottom. So when you catch the ball with the sharp bottom edge exactly in the equator, that's 3/4 of an inch. Now what do people blame? You lifted your head. So to illustrate this particular concept, how actually your head never was the problem, I ask people to lift their heads 3/4 of an inch. I say, okay, take a golf stance. All right, good. Now, from that golf stance, stand upright. So they do. And I ask them, okay, so your head started here, and then when you stood upright, it obviously lifted. Now, how far did it go from where it was to where it ended up? And they'll often say, oh, 6 or 8 or 10 inches, whatever they guesstimate. I don't know exactly what it is. So then I say, okay, well, that's good. Now, here's what I want you to do this time. Instead of standing completely upright and lifting your head this far, I want you to lift your head 3/4 of an inch. And then I'll demonstrate. I'll go, okay, something like this. I'm not sure if that's 3/4 of an inch exactly or not, because it's just this tiny fraction of movement that feels like nothing at all. So when I ask people to do this, here's what they typically do. They'll lift their heads about 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 inches, believing they've changed their head position by 3/4 of an inch. So here's the point of the discussion. If you can't tell where your parts are when you're completely motionless, fully focused on the task of changing your head position by 3/4 of an inch, and it takes people, when I ask them to do this, several attempts to come even remotely close to the 3/4 of an inch. Please explain to me how, while swinging this golf club around at unbelievable velocity in a curved arc relative to your straight target line, with the face going from, see if I can get out my little kid's pointer mechanism here, with the club face going from wide open, square at contact for the briefest millisecond of time, closing as it goes through. While all that's happening, explain to me how you're going to keep track of all the parts of you and make sure they're all doing the right thing from a biomechanical technical standpoint to within a 1/16 of an inch accurate, the thickness of our Canadian dollar coin. So you see, unfortunately, when golfers hit bad shots, they bark up the wrong tree thinking that, well, I just have to train my muscles to get better muscle memory so they'll move more accurately so I won't lift my head or bend my knees. For example, or straighten my knees, for example, with that scald shot that I hit just a while ago. I hit it right in the equator, 3/4 of an inch, right? So what's the typical thing that's blamed? Usually people will blame that the head was lifting coming through, and they'll usually exaggerate as if the head moved this much. Well, if you moved the head that much, you would have missed the ball by 1.5 feet. So it's only 3/4 of an inch. Usually the head is blamed. Must have lifted my head. Well, sometimes what people blame is that they were straightening their knees, and that's what caused the club to come up and catch it in the equator. Or Actually, I should do this over here to make it a little bit clearer so you get the full view of my body. So people will blame either A, I lifted my head, B, I straightened my knees, causing the club to come up, or C, oh, I must have bent my left arm. So hence, although on the surface that all seems to make some kind of logical sense, obviously something must have done something to cause the club to change its path by a mere 3/4 of an inch. It seems to make sense on the surface, but it's just tiny fractions of inches, right? So which was it? Did your knees straighten 3/4 of an inch? Did your arm bend 3/4 of an inch? Did your head lift 3/4 of an inch? Or maybe your arm bent 1/4 of an inch, your knees straightened 1/4 of an inch, and your head lifted 1/4 of an inch to total 3/4 of an inch. So you see, the real problem when people don't strike the ball precisely and accurately has nothing to do with looking for technical answers. Some part of you is doing something wrong, because it simply isn't the case. The vast majority of the time, it's simply a lack of awareness of the club head and a lack of skill in striking it. Now, I'm going to illustrate this a little further with this interesting idea.